feather, light, work, asking, answer, accepting, honoring, all we are, earth to star. The reason why we're sharing this is not to make ourselves important, inflate our own egos by saying, hey, we're able to do this trick. You want to see our cool trick? No. The reason why is because this is in all of us. People say we only use 10% of our brain or whatever. There's this huge access point to other areas of our inner knowing available through the art of subtlety. And, let's look at one more example before we go into the next phase of this. The elements, the 4 elements. Each of them has a whole array of ways they show up in nature. There's a subtle fire that might be seen in a candle flame, and there's a grandiose fire that might be seen in a bonfire or a forest fire, a wildfire. There is the subtlety of a raindrop and the grandiosity of a big colossal wave. The nature shows us the spectrum of ways that we can also be in this worldly existence. So I always look to nature as understanding my nature in the world by seeing the array of ways it expresses. And in this case, we're talking about 2 things. We're talking about the worldly experience, but also the spiritual experience. So having a spiritual experience, communing with spirits and Great Spirit and our higher selves, our ancestors, souls, communicating with souls, receiving information from souls, exchanging information from souls. It's similar, but it's subtle. It's all subtle, I venture to say. I don't know in my own experience how substantiation helps except for this. It puts the subtlety in a bigger expression, and with the grandiosity of it, I might have even bigger trust in that going places. But I can also bring that trust, that same faith and hope into my subtle expressions, my subtle intentions to connect in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now we've established a foundation here, a firm foundation. I want to give some specific examples, but again, I want to remind you, this is for you. This is for you to check in with your access point to messages from the divine. Messages that might come through your inner ears or your third eye or your feeling receptors. I want to give you an example. Just this weekend, it occurs to me that this is clairaudience.
Mm-hmm.
This was 9 years ago. I was sitting in silence, concentrating. I was meditating, sitting with receptivity, with openness. And this flash of insight came in like a lightning strike. And I interpreted it immediately as this. God is real. Heaven is here. It spoke in words that didn't necessarily have a distinct voice or flavor, but I felt like it was a masculine energy, and it came with an instant inner knowing. It didn't have any kind of loudness to it or song to it or swagger. It was just a gentle boom, like that, about that simple. And then that same session, that same quiet session, there were 4 other ones. And I'm going to hold those and cherish those for my own personal enjoyment right now. But they're similar in their grandiosity and truth with a capital T, at least in my standpoint. Audrey experiences this on a weekly basis, if not daily. She is an energy medicine practitioner and a psychic medium. So she holds space for people to heal. And the way she words it, in my understanding, is she's helping them to heal themselves. And she's kind of like doing the work of holding space for them to access that. Would you call that true?
Yeah, I would definitely call that true. And really, a lot of times, I think sometimes we get a little hung up. And so I can assist in the way by working with the soul or the highest form of consciousness that I can communicate with. And so I'm holding space for that soul to match whatever frequency I'm presenting them as an opportunity. And just because this is my level of expertise, this is something that I've been working at for a really long time, I've gotten to a place of technique and I would say skill that can be developed by anyone, of being able to hold enough light in my field to be able to make big shifts, big changes, and big moves. So maybe where it may not have been fully obtainable, there may have not been a belief to anchor in what they were doing. Not only do I help establish that belief, but I hold the light in my vessel to be able to like shift and move and release things that aren't serving. And I'm holding the communication as a liaison between the client's highest form of consciousness and the client. Maybe they're not in strong communication, maybe they're developing their communication. And also I experience this in myself, and I'm assuming my clients are experiencing this as well, is that often with our own stuff, we find a little bit more blind spot and need a little bit more support, a little bit more community to navigate some of our own challenges, versus when we can hold space and reflect back to others. I think it's a lot easier for us to hold the place of neutrality and compassion and neutrality and see the bigger picture of things when we're maybe holding space for someone else. Aspects of consciousness, our ego, our different parts, sometimes play self-preservation games. And what I mean by that is we're not always wanting to change. We're not always willing to change because we feel like we may be doing ourselves justice to stay in the way that we are because we know that we're safe. So it's so much easier to have a sounding board, an external viewpoint, an external vantage point, a God's eye view to communicate with the soul directly. And usually I just get information like, what should we work on? Where do we need to go? What's the biggest challenge? And we can get this from the conscious mind too, but sometimes we work through all that stuff and we still are having patterns show up, issues in our reality, challenges we're trying to overcome, and we might need a little support for someone who is maybe a little bit more seasoned at honing in and experiencing that communication. It really is just a muscle. It's like going to the gym. Like the more time you put into it, the more you work on it, the more clarity becomes available to us.
Here we're illustrating communication. We're talking about clairaudience. We're talking about hearing with the voice inside. And the voice inside is a lot of things. It's like Jiminy Cricket from Pinocchio. Yeah. It's like the voice of our conscious awareness, literally the voice of our conscience. And it's also, it can be a voice beyond us. It can be another voice. It can be a voice of truth or a voice of warning, guiding and guarding us. Outside of the clairaudient spectrum, there's the clairvoyant spectrum. Now we're talking about visions. And some people are able to see dead people. Some people are able to see flashes of insight, see roads ahead, see future frames, see past lives. Some people are able to see that way. Me, myself, there have been times when I was able to see in the dark equally as well as I could see with my eyes open, walking in the dark, and I could sense somehow in my inner eyes it was almost like a glow of these prickly plants. I was walking in the desert at night, and instead of running directly into the thorns, I was able to work my way around them and find my way in the desert through my inner eyes. And we all have this access point too. I've read about it in books, and this is what I think opened me to these possibilities. This sentence right here. In order for us to have a spiritual experience, we must first imagine. Imagination is an open door to a spiritual existence. We're already existing in spirit. Now I know that I am always in my soul. My soul is always in its home place. I always have accessibility to my home with a capital H. It's just that my eyes, ears, hands, these worldly experiences dominate most of my earthly existence. So that's what I'm thinking about. That's what I'm processing in my waking life, is these worldly experiences. And if I close my eyes, if I return to source, I have access to that eternal wellspring of love. I can fill up my love cup and drink it up. I can take good care of myself on a soul level by returning to where I truly am. So it's almost like a point of humility to surrender outside of all this worldly dominating experience and surrender to that home place through imagining. And so there are practices that help us to imagine, to see with our eyes closed. One of them is called the 13 color spectrum. So we basically see the color red with an inhalation, see the color red-orange with an exhalation, and it goes through the spectrum like that. You can imagine how to go from there. We can also imagine seeing a loved one and being with them. We can imagine where we left the keys if we're losing our keys. We can imagine and then actually see and actually get places and actually help ourselves in our earth walks through that art of imagining, through that art of visualization. And of course, for us artists, that visualization, seeing with our eyes closed can help us in our writing, in our painting, any expression of art, to be able to see it with our eyes closed and then try our best to replicate what we see with our eyes closed on a canvas of some kind. That's a fun practice.
It's a super fun practice. And I had a mentor one time that said, if you can imagine it, if you're having an idea, or that our ideas come in, or ideas come in through our crown chakra, and if you're having something, an idea come in, it is available for us to manifest. We're not going to have access to ideas or imagination or images or anything that is not available for us. We're in an aligned state. And if it's coming in through an idea, imagination, a presentation of some sort, that just means that we can have access to that and we can create from that space. So I think it's really beautiful. I think that we can get a little bit confused about imagination because for some reason at some point it seems like there was a popular perspective that imagination is not real. But I think the idea of imagination is to use that clairvoyance plane, that plane of reality that exists in our mind's eye. And by knowing that when we create in that way, it can be real and we can move from that place of creation, it just influences us to practice that more and more, to use that mental plane, to use that clairvoyant plane. And Kate made a really good point. There's ways and activities that we can sharpen this. And one of my favorite things is remembering the lost something or other, or remembering where we put our keys down last. If we can get quiet and go in, and I want to know where my keys are, and I start to try to remember and visualize where those keys are, that is now giving me access to my clairvoyance. That's giving me access to my visual plane on the inside. So even if I don't exactly know where the keys are, I'm going in and accessing these skills on their own. And this is the way we develop the muscles. This is the way we gain trust in ourselves. The next time that you do this and you just all of a sudden see where the keys are and you go right there and you find those keys, that is going to be extremely powerful and a really strong confirmation of this natural skill and ability. So I invite you to play in this realm as much as possible so that you can start to create some trust in that ability to visualize outside of this 3D and move through time and space in that way.
Imagining is safe and it's always good. It's always good to look inside and feel things out. And it's almost like a necessary stepping point before taking action whenever we have the luxury of time and space, which is always, it's a good idea to imagine like that, to think ahead, to check in before taking a big leap. Imagine the future frame that we're stepping into, that we desire in life. Just as a reminder, we have to use our discernment when we imagine, because we can have a vision come in and it can be as if we're supposed to actualize that vision. And if we run too far with the way things are in our mind, then we can have the consequences of that being a misinterpreted bit of information. And here, I'll give you a couple examples. Discernment looks like this. We might have a fantasy of, kissing a beautiful person that we see here. If we didn't use our discretion and we approached it with too much arrogance, too much ego, then we might have consequences of it. Here's another example, totally different. If I'm collecting all these songs and I just expect everyone to love and adore these songs because I have it in my mind that I'm going to be on a big stage sharing these songs with everybody, and everybody's going to be adoring this music and applauding, and then that vision doesn't seem to be accessible to me, I might feel sad by that. So I have to use my discernment to know if this is actually a calling, a higher calling for me to run and leap in that direction, or if I can just gently, subtly lean in that direction, and the miracles that Holy Spirit actually has for us will crystallize. This actually happened for me. I have gifts and I want to share my gifts, right? And sometimes I might think that my gifts are supposed to make a big, giant, colossal wave on the world, and it's not designed to be that way, maybe. Maybe it's just designed to create a little love drop. And I see that my gifts really bless me up. So I give that little bit of a love drop to me, and it makes big ripples inside me. So when I express myself artistically, musically, on an art canvas, then it brings something of a medicine to me. It feels satisfying to me on a soul level. It really lights me up. And then sometimes that love ripple extends to others, and it does make a great effect. I share my songs with my kids at night, and it makes a good impression on them. They have peaceful sleep almost every single night when they're with me. They sleep all through the night. They wake up refreshed. I think those sweet little bedtime songs make a mark. By the time I went to the studio with my band to record some of these songs, they crystallized and they came together in such a beautiful way. And that blesses me up. That gives me a big gift to cherish the gifts. So just because I had this notion, this idea in my inner eye that something was supposed to be really big or a certain way, the reality of it was even greater than I could even comprehend. So I just need to gently, subtly lean in the direction of that vision, and then it comes with all its miracles. If I try too hard to access it, if I try to put too much of my ego and myself into any notion, then I might suffer the consequences of it. If you look back on any of our episodes here in Feather Lightwork, you'll see a common thread in inviting you to check in with what's right for you as it relates to your healing path, your path of learning, and your path of connection. So we believe that you are your own greatest healer, teacher, and ally. And if you trace any of these episodes, you'll see subtle exercises that'll point you in the direction of your inner knowing. There are a couple of ones that we have discussed in the past that I just want to hint at real quick. We don't need to go into the depths of them. You can, reference those other episodes and get all the information you need. But Audrey is a champion of this energy medicine practice called grounding. And this is a daily practice for her. And for me, it's a practice that I use if ever I'm off balance, if I'm feeling wobbly, if I need to just take care of myself and have a moment to check in. I ground in with my energy body to the center of the earth. Does grounding mean I dig a great big hole? Does grounding mean I go and hug a tree? There are a lot of ways to ground. Sometimes people are barefoot outside in the grass. Sometimes people do hug a tree or they touch a tree. They connect with nature in whatever way. And there's a subtle way of driving our energy, sending our energy, extending our energy body into the center of this planet, centering that way, centering ourselves on an emotional state. There's a centering practice called grounding that is a subtle energetic movement. I'd just love for you to speak on that.
So like Hib's saying, we're not literally digging a hole and sticking a wire all the way down to the core of the earth. So what we're doing is we're using a subtle way of connecting with our energy body, and we're moving through that practice in a really, really delicate way, using our visual plane or using our inner knowing to create this stability. So I'm just closing my eyes. I'm going in. I'm identifying with where I am. I'm identifying with where my field is. And I'm just bringing my field in my mind all the way down to the core of the earth. And I just take myself down there. I visualize myself going down there. I visualize myself connecting at that space in the core of the earth. And then I bring myself back up. And I'm using my mind's eye, I'm using my visual plane, and I'm using my inner knowing to do this in this way. And it's subtle because you looking at me would not know that I'm doing it. So that's why we associate this with a subtle practice, because it's requiring very little physical movement. This is all done in the energy field. This is all done in my mind's eye. This is all done through intention, in a very quiet, in a very simple, in a very subtle way. And when I'm done and I come back up and I land in my heart space, and it looks like I never even moved.
Yeah, subtlety is like that. Other ways to ground might not be appropriate for a certain situation, but subtlety is always accessible, like praying, for example. It might not be appropriate for us to just say, hey, God, can we talk real quick? And, verbalize a prayer like that. But in our quietness of our thoughts, we can connect with God. It's a simple, subtle action like that, and it's always accessible. It's always we're always able to access that. It doesn't offend. It's always on.
So again, we would just close our eyes, connect with ourselves, connect with our own will and our own intention, and then we just speak from our mind and speak from our energy. We say our prayer. And we come back into our body and we arrive back into this space. And you or anyone else on the outside would have no idea what's happening on the inside. So that's where it's subtle and much different than, hey, God, it's Audrey. It's me, Audrey Little. I'd like to talk to you about something really, really special. I just want to express gratitude for this beautiful partner I have and how supported I am, right down to him helping me not fidget on camera.
And really, we're talking about self-care. We're always talking about self-care. So sometimes taking care of ourselves might look like taking a big yoga practice or going for a jog, but it might not always be accessible to us. But taking a deep breath is a subtle way to take care of ourselves physically. How about this? The bee sound. Bzzz. Can you feel that warm, fuzzy feeling? Do you check in with yourself when the hair rises on your arms or when you get a ring in your ear? Do you check in with your higher self? What is that? It's subtle. It's happening for a reason. Another really wonderful exercise that I practice sometimes is the eagle cry whistle, like I mentioned. And sometimes when I'm a little bit wobbly, I just do an exhalation. It's like I'm the force, the extra energy. Maybe it's like a looping story or a pain point or like a moment of frustration. I can let it go. I can expel it like that. send it out. And another one is sending energy into the earth. The earth is able to receive our excess energy. We can say, I now release what does not serve. I now release what does not serve. I now release what does not serve. Send it out like that. There's so many ways to explore this. I'll leave with this, and I'll leave it to you to conclude this. Just this weekend, I found a new insight, a new way to play with subtlety that I never saw before. I was hearing these beautiful sounds in nature. And at night, there were cricket sounds and frog sounds, and there's this beautiful bird of some kind. I was asking myself, how can I communicate with that bird? How can I speak that bird speak? I want to know that language. I could almost replicate it. And in a quiet space, I could hear it and play with that, and then commune in the area of frequency. Frequency is even more subtle than a message, even more subtle than a melody. It's a subtle vibration. Frequency. That's what we're talking about here.
Absolutely. And it's really, really exciting to just stand in this awareness and this knowing that we all have this ability to do this.
Yeah.
It's really, really exciting to be able to authentically say that this is something we can master, we can grow, it can get clearer, there's more clarity. And there's so much available to us that we can't see with our main 5 senses. And we really, really appreciate you suspending your disbelief and jumping into maybe some of these exercises. And I'm super excited that you guys will be able to experience it just the same. We'd love to know your comments and feedback. We'd love to know your experiences. It's a pleasure now and always to be here with you and you. Mm-hmm.